The reason we are in the Twilight Zone is because of the death of a child, and that child's name was Emmett Till. Y'all asked me for the episode that Rod dedicated to him. Well, baby, is here, and that is I Am the Night, Color Me Black. Picture it, we're in a small town in the Midwest in 1962. A sheriff wakes up for his shift, and his wife realizes it's still dark outside, but usually it's not at this time. And this is when we learn that the sheriff is getting ready for work, and it's not just any day at work. Today, somebody's getting executed. But his wife doesn't have much compassion for this person. The sheriff, however, seems to be a bit irritated with her lack of humanity. This is when they show outside. Now, this man gets executed at 9:30. Y'all, it is 7:30, and it is pitch black everywhere. And when the sheriff gets to the office, even his deputy is a bit concerned because he's like, we're supposed to do this at 9:30, and it is still pitch black outside. I need the sun to rise. Everybody is very callous about that, and even I didn't like it. And this is when my Uncle Rod comes in, and he's like, typically, natural laws dictate that the sun should be up by this time. But something is hanging over this Midwestern town, and we don't understand why. But what we do know is that we're in the Twilight Zone, and baby, I leaned in. Now, the head of the newspaper walks in, and he's like, this is so weird. I've called everybody. Nobody understands what's happening. He even called the state capitol, and everybody in the country has sunlight, except this town. So the sheriff asked the deputy if he's seen the prisoner today, and he begrudgingly responds, I brought him a cup of coffee. And his response made my own bias come out, because I said, I wonder what Fenty shade the prisoner uses, because I know it's darker than 300. I know he hates this man, and I know it's the reason. And the newspaper owner picks up on his tea, because he's like, how did you get this job? What little things did you torture? Then he turns his attention to the sheriff, and he's like, so, is the guy innocent? And the sheriff is like, honestly, I don't know. That's between the jurors, him, and God. And that's when we learn that the newspaper owner doesn't just have tea. He has liquor. Girl, he tells us that the man that the prisoner got rid of was not a good man at all. And he alludes to him being a part of the Coneheads, if you know what I mean. But girl, the tea became whiskey when the newspaper owner said that the deputy said that the person who was murdered from across the room. However, the newspaper owner said that it was quietly reported that the victim had powder burns on them. And powder burns would allude to the victim being a lot closer, which would mean that the deputy was lying, child. And for some odd reason, this was not reported in the autopsy. And I said, girl, let me see the prisoner. I bet he is. Good girl, cousin. Baby, the reveal of this prisoner almost gave me a silk press. I was shocked. So the newspaper owner goes in the cell and he asks the prisoner, so you don't want to talk to any priests, you don't want to see any friends, and you don't have any comment. Why is that? Did you do it? And the prisoner is kind of like, bro, it is what it is. I don't want to see nobody. I don't want to be prayed for. I don't care at this point. But the newspaper owner is like, well, you should at least want to make a statement of if you're guilty or if you're innocent. Like, don't you think you deserve that? And with no hesitation, he's like, I'm guilty. Now what? And this is when we learn that this man is actually always trying to make sure he is taking care of his neighbors no matter what they look like or who they are. He calls himself the village idiot that tries to be his brother's keeper. And this is when the prisoner confirms to us that the person he got rid of was one of the Bugle boys. Look up the Chip Bugles, kids. You'll see what you'll get it. Girl, that was a 10 out of 10. I'm too quick, I'm good. And this is when we learn he's really at peace with what he did. And if you have never seen this and you're thinking, oh, I got it. So the truth is gonna come out. They're not gonna get rid of him. And that's when the sun's gonna come up. Wrong. Because that would be too easy. And Rod Serling is much smarter than y'all. Girl, it's 9 a.m. And unlike Maya Angelou, the sun has not risen. I'm so sorry. That's my second 10 out of 10 joke. I'm done because this is really a serious episode. And now the townfolk are arriving to watch this. And as they're waiting for the show to begin, they're listening to the radio and they're like, girl, I don't know what's going on in this little town in the Midwest, but the sun has not risen and it is almost 9:30. And 9:30 is when our prisoner is supposed to be executed. But there is not a speck of empathy in this crowd. They're like, oh, this looks good. Yeah, let's do it. But this is when we realize that the sheriff is starting to feel a little bad about this. The deputy, on the other hand, couldn't care less. He's like, it's 9:30, so let's get it done. Now, right before they go head out to pick up the prisoner, the newspaper owner is like, yeah, maybe we'll be here until everybody finds out the truth. And the deputy is like, some little crummy newspaper is gonna tell us the truth. Like, who cares? Let's just get it over with. And the deputy looks at the sheriff and he's like, and I don't know why you over here kissing up to him when he don't like you either. He was talking about you behind your back as well. And this is when the sheriff says, you know what, you're right. I did turn a blind eye. I saw the powder. I knew that the victim had to be close. And I literally was like, well, I need to get reelected. So It is what it is. I'm gonna just ignore the autopsy and the fact that it's a lie, and I'm gonna commit perjury. Then he looks the deputy in the face and he said, and you'll do it again too, because you like to feel important. Don't we all? And they get in an argument. Now, as all this is going on, the newspaper owner turns around and he sees this reverend. And this is when we learn that the reverend tried to see the prisoner. And he tried to see the prisoner because the individual that the prisoner was taken up for was a black man. So they go get the prisoner, and the reverend steps out in front of the crowd and he wants to speak to him, but the prisoner is like, I don't have anything to say. And the reverend is like, well, I do. And he goes, now I know we don't share the same faith, and that's all right, but I want to thank you because you stood up for me and my people, and that's admirable. And he asked him straight up, but did you do it? The prisoner says, yeah, I did. And he goes, and how did it feel? Did it feel good? The prisoner is like, yup, and I'll do it again. The prisoner even says, I mean, but we all would. Nobody is perfect. And the reverend says, and that's the unfortunate part. We are all the majority, and the minority died on the cross 2,000 years ago. And girl, they're taking him up there, and that crowd is going crazy like they had a sports game. And the prisoner is like, yeah, don't worry. I'm going to do all the things to make y'all fully enjoy this display. But I will never apologize for what I did because that man got what he had coming. And this is when we realize that the reverend is like, please don't return their hate. Don't do it. Let them yell, and you just take your fate. And the reverend asked him again, so you didn't feel any remorse? And the man is like, none. And unfortunately, those were his last words. And now that everybody sees his body, now they're horrified. And the deputy comes up to the reverend and is like, look at you, finally joining the right side of history. And this is when the reverend realizes why it's been dark. He says, do you know why there's darkness all around us? Do you know what the blackness is? It's the hate that he felt. It's the hate that y'all felt and the hate that we all feel. And he goes, it's just too much. So we had to get it all out of us. And now it's in the sky. And immediately after that speech, it gets even darker. They go back to the office. They barely made it there because they couldn't see. And the deputy is like, there's going to be sun, isn't there? Like, this is just temporary. And this is when we get the unfortunate news that a dark spot has now appeared over Dallas, Texas, and other areas across the globe now, like Berlin, Vietnam, Shanghai, Birmingham, Alabama, and he calls out last, Chicago, Illinois. And what was chilling about this was that though Emmett Till was murdered in Mississippi, he was laid to rest in Chicago, Illinois, and I believe that was a nod to him. This episode also aired a year after JFK's murder, and where did that happen? In Dallas, Texas. And Rod ends this episode by saying, there's a sickness known as hate. It's not a germ, but a sickness nonetheless that is highly contagious and deadly in its effects. And then he slaps us all by saying, but don't look for it in the Twilight Zone. Look in the mirror. And as Rod Serling's self-proclaimed black play niece, I'll leave you with these words. Whenever you feel compelled to believe that someone does not belong here because of what they look like, what they believe, or who they love, I want you to remember